This website is called the Emily Dickinson Archive. Basically, they've uploaded all 800 of her poems from her notebooks, like in her own handwriting, to this website. So you can see how she wrote them, how she changed them, what she looked at. Now, there are several different editions of Emily Dickinson's work. There's one from 1849 called the Franklin edition, and there's one, maybe it's 1869 or 1865. I need to be absolutely sure. But there's basically 2 or 3 different editions of Emily Dickinson's work. So you can see from her original manuscripts what she's written. So I'm going to read you one of my favorite Dickinson poems, and then we're going to check it out in her handwriting on the Dickinson Archive. So this is I'm Nobody. I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? Then there's a pair of us. Don't tell, they'd advertise, you know. How dreary to be somebody. How public, like a frog. To tell one's name the livelong June to an admiring bog. All right. It's a short, sweet little thing. A bog? A bog is a little swampy, lakey thing. They have them in Ireland and Scotland. Lots of bogs. Oh yeah, he does live in a bog. Swampy peat moss, that kind of thing. All right, so I'm going to find the manuscript here. And I might shut off one more light so you can see better, because it's, you know, handwriting. So you see that there's 2 different versions here. There's one from 1861 that was published in the 1955 edition. And then there's one from 1891 that was published. So this is really cool. We can look at the Johnson one, and we can look at the other one as well. So here is our original manuscript. I'm going to try to get that out of there so we can really see it. I don't know what the stars are for, but let's check it out. I'm nobody, exclamation point here. Who are you? Are you dash nobody dash too? Then there's a pair of us. Don't tell. They'd, do you see that word? No, I don't think so. Let me give you the text to it if I can find it. Oh, there we go. So this is the one we're looking at, okay? It's really pretty, but it'd be nice to have the text up beside it too, right? All right. So here's that text. I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? Then there's a pair of us. Don't tell. They banish us, you know. How dreary to be somebody, how public, like a frog, to tell your name the livelong June to an admiring bog. Look right here. She's got your there, she's got ones right above it, right? So one of them is pointing directly to tell your name, and the other one is a little more impersonal. And you notice they say they'd banish us. And underneath, she's got advertise written, and it's underlined. So check out the capital letters and stuff too. Do you think that's a capital N? It's hard to tell. How dreary to be somebody. How is what a two? Just her handwriting. Keep in mind their pens weren't as nice as ours, right? So maybe she was aiming, but she was scribbling fast, right? At least that's the way I took it. Remember, you got to dip your hand in your ink back in the 1800s, and as long as your ink is, working pretty well. So somebody for sure looks capitalized. Frog. Well, I don't know. But check out all of that, those capitalizations. Check out all of that stuff, right? So then this is the version that they actually published. This was in the first edition. Okay, so this is the same image for the handwriting, but the text is different because this is the version that her editor put forth. I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody, comma, two? Then there's a pair of us, don't tell. They'd banish us, How dreary to be somebody, how public like a frog, to tell your name the livelong day to an admiring bog. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do a side-by-side comparison of these two editions, because it tells you exactly, like through doing this kind of textual analysis, it tells you what kinds of things editors do, right? What editors do to the poets that they're supposed to be taking care of their work. So I'm going to pull up, I think we'll just do a document. So this is the published version. What do you say, Daniel? Emily Dickinson. Well, yeah, she was really highly introverted. I don't think she intended necessarily for people to see her work. Reading her journals. Yeah, I always think like that whenever you hear of a writer who wasn't published until after their death. You wonder, right? All right, let's see. I'm trying to make this two things. What I can just do is this. Okay, so this is 1891 poems. That's that published version. And let's get the version from her fascicle or her notebook, the manuscript itself. So this is the Johnson Poems edition from 1955. All right, so let's start talking about differences between these two texts, right? 1891 was a lot closer to her death when it was published, like considerably closer, over 50 years, nearly 60. So this person who would have published her work would have had direct access to those fascicles. you look at 1955 poems, and they also had direct access to the fascicles, but did very different things with the texts that they found. Well, let's start. Let's just go line by line, the differences between these two. I think I'm going to do a text box. There we go. Maybe markup would be easier. Oh no, hold up. I got annotation. Okay. First line here. What's the first difference we see between the 1891 and 1855? I'm nobody. Who are you? Okay. So that'll be one major difference. Are any of the nobodies capitalized there? Okay. So that's our first thing here, right? So the 1891 editor, oops. Made it lowercase, right? All right, so that's one major difference here. Right, are you nobody too? Nate, I think you had this one, right? Yeah, what'd you say? No dashes. Yeah. Are you dash nobody dash two? So what are they replaced with then? So yeah, they're replaced with a single comma, which, does that make you read it differently? Genuine question. I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? What's the difference there in tone and the way it looks when you don't, or when you have those dashes instead of a comma? There's definitely a longer pause, right? But what about the difference in meaning? Is there a difference in meaning? I say yes. How would you characterize it? If there's a much longer pause, what does it tell us about our speaker? How does she seem to be? Are you dash nobody dash two? What do you think? So the question was, what's the result of having a dash, two sets of dashes instead of a comma? What does it make you think about our speaker? Speaker in this one says, are you nobody too? This one says, are you dash nobody dash two? Is there a difference in meaning? Yeah. Maybe shy, right? Whereas this one seems like it's a very direct question. Like, hey, are you nobody too? Whereas this one, there's a hesitation, and that hesitation matters because it tells us about our speaker and what kind of person our speaker might be. So yeah, maybe she's shy, maybe she's hesitant. Then there's a pair of us. What about that line? What's different? Yeah, the don't tell is on the same line. Oops, I'm just changing colors of everything. So don't tell is on this line, whereas don't tell is the beginning of the second line. Then there's a pair of us, don't tell. Then there's a pair of us, exclamation point. Don't tell, they'd banish us, you know. Is there a difference between these two in meaning? Yeah, no? Think it through out loud. That's what Michelle did, and she had good possibilities there. Ugh, I keep changing my color. I'm driving myself nuts. So if they have it at the end of another line, like if it's connected to another sentence, then what part of the sentence is considered important? What'd you say? Yeah, there's less emphasis on a don't tell if it's all in one phrase, and it's kind of almost a run on, right? When there's a pair of us, don't tell, as opposed to this one, then there's a pair of us, and there's this exclamation point that is like almost excited and joyful. And if we go back to Michelle's idea, then what's that mean? Then there's a pair of us. Right? She was scared to ask. Now she's psyched up, right? It's exciting to find another nobody. Whereas in this one, it seems to be a secret, right? It's almost like telling you, don't tell. Then there's a pair of us, don't tell. Whereas this one is like, woohoo, my people, I have found you. That's easier to see. So I think that sense of shame comes out in this one, or something along those lines. All right. So this next line is a really good one. They'd banish us, you know. So that word banish, what's it mean? You're an outcast, right? Like you're going to be tossed out. You're going to be rejected, correct? So it's that word banish. Banish us. Like you should, like we got to be careful, right? If people know we're nobodies, they'll reject us. They'll treat us poorly. Look at this one. They'd banish us, you know. First of all, it takes a pause, but secondly, we know that she wrote in the margin, advertise, and she underlined it. How does that change the meaning to be rejected as opposed to advertising? If banished means they'd be rejected, then what does advertise mean? Don't tell, they'd advertise. Everyone else will want to be nobody too. They'd want to join our secret club. Stay out. It's only for nobodies. So we know that's the word that she preferred because she actually underlined that in the margins, and that's the one she was thinking about. So in this case, advertise was a secret club. They only want the real nobodies, right? The ones who are quiet, the ones who keep it on the down low. It's exclusive, right? So then we have how dreary to be somebody, how public like a frog, to tell one's name the livelong day to an admiring bog. I'm gonna do a little experiment here, okay? I'm gonna replace somebody with a celebrity name. Someone give me a celebrity name. How dreary to be Kanye. How public like a frog, to tell Kanye's name the livelong June to an admiring bog. How dreary. Does everything have to be political? Okay. Well, this is what I think. Somebody here is saying they almost feel bad for people who are famous, who are capital S somebodies, people who are public, people who matter, people whose names are brought up in everyday conversation. She's like, that would be terrible. You're constantly telling people things. You're constantly hearing your name, right? Some people like it. She sounds like it would be awful. And there is one more major change in that line too. To tell one's name the livelong June versus the livelong day. What's the difference? What's the difference between June and a day? There you go. So in the first one, they're making it like it's not a big deal. Like if you have to tell your name to people for one day, like whatever, right? If you're famous for a day, no big deal. But for an entire June, that sounds a lot more exhausting, right? And a lot less fun. So June makes it seem more like forever as opposed to a day. Also, when you think about frogs, I think of them croaking in the ponds in the summer, right? Like, isn't June where you get a lot of frogs before it's like too hot? And the frogs eat them. This last one is our last difference here. Our last major difference is bog. What do you think to an admiring bog is? We said earlier that that was a swamp. But what if we took it to mean a crowd, right? To an admiring bog with a capital makes it seem like it's a gigantic group of people. Like if you capitalize bog, you're like huge crowd, to an admiring bog. Whereas this admiring bog up in 1891 poems connects more closely with frog, like it's just one pond, right? As opposed to an entire habitat. So the capital bog is a crowd, right? At least that's how I see it. Now, we're going to get into the murky waters of author intent here, okay? So we know that both of these editors had access to the fascicles. And we know a little bit about Emily Dickinson's life now too, right? From watching Crash Course yesterday and finding out that she kind of lived on her own, was very introverted, very reclusive. Which of these, in your opinion, seem to be more closely aligned with Emily Dickinson's original intent in your mind? 1891 or 1855 edition? Or sorry, 1955. Can you take a vote? She wrote it closer to 1891, but this looks a lot more like her fascicle. I'll take us back to that so we can look at the manuscript again too. Oh, shoot. Can't do that without keeping all the annotations too. So I guess I need to take a quick screenshot. There we go. Make sure it's actually saved. We'll clear it. So we go back to our fascicle here. There's your exclamation point. There's those infamous dashes. Don't tell, exclamation point. So it was not connected to the previous line. They'd banish us, you know. And underneath here we have advertise. How dreary dash to be dash somebody. How public. Notice this dash is a lot bigger though, this one in the middle. To tell one's name, the livelong June, to an admiring bog. Oh. I'm really curious about her capitals. I definitely think somebody is capitalized, for sure. I struggle to be able to tell if nobody is. So if we go back to our two versions, it's clear to me that the 1891's poems tried to, what's the word I'm looking for? Tried to make the lines the same, right? Like if they thought nobody was uncapitalized, they tried to make sure that they uncapitalized everything for consistency. That's the word I was looking for. For consistency. This one says some words are capitalized and some are not. And the ones that are capitalized versus the ones who are not may have a specific or particular intent. You don't necessarily know until you look at it. So this was published much closer to the time when she was living. But this follows more closely the things that she actually had written down in her notebook. This editor took a lot of liberties with what she was thinking and made some choices that really authored a different poem. It's not quite the same thing. So that's going to be the thing we actually do tomorrow. I'm going to have you get on the Emily Dickinson Archive and you're going to do a textual analysis. You're going to compare two different poems, and you're going to talk about how those things change and how they possibly change meaning, right? We're going to look at author intent and do the best we can checking it out. So you can decide whether or not it would be more fun to be nobody or somebody with your remaining few minutes.